All right, good morning, everybody. We are going to get started shortly. Please make sure you are muted as you're coming in if you're not already. And in the meantime, I would love it if folks could introduce themselves in the chat with your name, your school district or organization that you're representing, and where you're joining from as well. And we'll get started shortly. And Liz, if you'd like to pull up the slides, we can start with our presentation.
Certainly.
All right, I love seeing all these introductions in the chat. If you're just joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, school district, or organization that you are representing and where you're joining from. I would just hit a slideshow at the top right.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Thank you. Well,
All right,
let's
so
go ahead and dive in, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning again, everybody. I see lots of introductions coming through the chat. That's great. Please keep them coming. Thank you so much for joining us for Solar Successes and Lessons Learned, case studies from Pennsylvania schools. We are really excited for this conversation with our speakers who have gone through the process of going solar for their respective districts and have many, many insights to share with us. So my name is Lane Frazee, and I'm the coordinator for PHENND Sustainability, which is a co-organizer for this event, along with the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association. So just very briefly, PHENND Sustainability is a sub-network of the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development, which addresses the need for a coordinated approach to education for sustainability across the K-16 spectrum, that's K-12 plus college, in the Delaware Valley. And there are some very exciting educational opportunities along with the cost savings that solar arrays provide. So I'm very excited for the fullness of that conversation. And I just want to take a moment before we get started to thank our partners on this webinar, the PA Solar Center, Generation 180, and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. They've been instrumental in getting the word out and helping us reach this wide audience that we have joining us today. So thank you so much for your support. And I'm going to put some information about each of them in the chat shortly. So today is the second out of 3 webinars in a series on solar for schools as well as nonprofits. If you'd like to view the recording for the first event in May, focusing on the Inflation Reduction Act tax incentives, I'm going to share that recording in the chat as well. And Liz Robinson, my co-organizer from PCEA, will share more about the third webinar later on. So finally, before I turn it over to Liz to get us started, I am just going to go over some brief Zoom housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be sent out at the end of next week. Please just make sure that you are muted if you're not already. And please feel free to make use of the chat during the presentation to engage with the group as well as to ask questions. If you have a quick clarifying question about something said by one of the speakers, please send it through the chat, as we have a few folks who are going to be looking out for questions and responding to them directly there throughout the presentation. And if you have a question that requires a longer answer or is better suited for discussion, you can submit it through the chat or through the Q&A function, and a speaker will respond to it during our Q&A. So I will go ahead now and turn it over to Liz Robinson, who is the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association, who's going to share more about the upcoming Solar Schools Toolkit, as well as introducing today's speakers and beginning to moderate today's discussion.
Thanks so much, Lane. We're really thrilled to have all of you. We've got a marvelous group of speakers for you. Three individuals from Pennsylvania schools that have already gone solar. Mick Iskric, who's the superintendent of Steelton-Highspire School District. Rick Musselman, former superintendent of Midwest School District. And Mark Stein, who's the director of facilities and operations for Bethlehem Area School District. Also presenting with us is Roger Clark, whose last job before his retirement was the director of the Sustainable Development Fund. And again, I want to reiterate our thanks and appreciation for the wonderful cooperation from our partners. We're really excited about the development of a very strong statewide network of support for solar on schools, which is very exciting. So as Lane said, the Solar Schools Toolkit will be coming out very shortly by the end of June. And what we've really appreciated in the process of developing this toolkit is that all entities, essentially, there are many advantages to going solar for anyone, but especially for schools. Schools have unique challenges and responsibilities. It's critical for schools to save money. It is critical for schools to stabilize their operating costs. And that's a huge benefit of solar. Many schools increasingly are becoming community resilience hubs in the event of weather or climate disasters. And solar improves resilience, as well as offering tremendous educational opportunities for students. So schools have a unique set of benefits in addition to those that are available to everyone. So as Lane said, this webinar today is going to follow the structure of this toolkit. And we're going to start with Mick Iskric. If you could just give us a big kind of overview and walkthrough of your experience at Steelton-Highspire.
Yes, thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. My name's Mick Iskric, Superintendent, Steelton-Highspire School District. And we are an underfunded school district in central Pennsylvania, roughly $10 million underfunded. So we look for projects that support our needs, but we do things out of necessity. And we were able to do a solar array that is actually generating some revenue for us, where, you know, it basically, the land that it was built on is a former brownfield that was a landfill behind our high school. We were able to repurpose that land and put a 1.6 megawatt system in the last 2 years on our property. It's actually generating more than 1.6 megawatts right now, which is definitely a cost savings and revenue generator for us. As you see from the highlights on the slide, we are currently in a PPA with McClure Company. They're a company based in Harrisburg that worked very closely with us on this project. And we offset 100% of our district's electricity needs. Thank you.
And our second presenter is Rick Musselman. Rick, could you walk us through your experience?
Sure. Thank you, Liz, and welcome everybody. Midwest School District actually worked with Greenworks Development to put in our solar array. And we have actually two of those. We have a remote elementary school with a small solar array, but we also have a campus in Middleburg where we actually put in a larger solar array, and at that time it was designed to produce 96% of the school district's energy, and of course they're moving forward with actually going to 110% of the district's energy. I believe that project's going to be happening this summer. Working with Greenworks, what we decided to do or looked at was we wanted to have ownership of our program as soon as possible. So after the 5 years, we will actually own our own solar array. And so we set up our finances to be able to do that at the end, and saving a significant amount of money over the years. And as energy costs continue to go up, it's not just saving money right now. What we looked at is how do we become more protected from the rising cost of energy. I didn't know it at the time how energy was going to go up, but now, of course, we look back and say, wow, this was a really great move to make, and the sooner you do it, the better. So for Midwest School District, it's been a good investment, and we had some land that pretty much was unused, and we're blessed with having additional land, so we placed it on those areas, and it's been working wonderfully for the past several years. Thank you.
That's great. It's a beautiful array. I love that. And our third school district is Bethlehem Area School District. Mark, could you take us through this?
Yes, good morning. Thanks, Liz. Sure. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so back in, I guess we're old timers in this group here. Back in 2011, we started this. And again, full disclosure, I can't take all the credit for this. This ball was rolling before I arrived here in this position a dozen years ago. So, but we kind of jumped into the solar game based on state grants from the Department of Community Economic Development in Harrisburg, and leveraged those grants and a PPA to construct 5 arrays, 3 ground mounts, a roof mount there on the left, and a parking canopy you can see there on the right. So our experience has been a little different than our other 2 speakers. You know, the financing as we started out, you know, it didn't cost a district a dime to jump into the game. So this entire system was installed for 0 district investment. It represents about 10% of our total energy spend across our district. So it made all the sense in the world. Over the last 12 years, we generally broke even the first half of our arrangement, but as energy prices became you know, very, very low, all-time lows, who would thunk back in 2010 that we'd be spending, you know, 7 cents all in for electricity. So, you know, it didn't pan out as rosy as initial projections. So we pay a small premium for our solar generation on site. But in the end, for a school district, it's about representation, it's about leadership, it's about community engagement. So we see it as one of many tools in our chest of energy conservation and sustainability. And you know, we take advantage of opportunities we can. And if you can find grant money out there, make it happen. I highly recommend you pursue it. And you too can make a difference. With energy costs rising here in the very near future, things are going to turn around for us financially in terms of the extra value for the solar. And it's another way to you know, hedge your bets against rising energy costs here in the coming years.
Great, thank you. So the first step in the toolkit is to build a team. I'm just going to ask each of you to describe your own teams. So who were your early champions? Who were the key decision makers? And did you run into any barriers along the way? And if so, how did you overcome them? And could we start with Mick?
Yes, so my team is made up of our basic central admin team. We're very small. So I was assistant superintendent at the time, and our superintendent and business manager were there as well. So it was basically us 3 working with our service provider, McClure Company. And then also our energy consultant was NRG, based out of Harrisburg here as well. So with all the partners together, we were able to get this off the ground. So it's very, very small team, very goal oriented, knowing that we wanted to, you know, generate revenues and reduce expenditures, you know, with that mindset.
You had a very focused goal. throughout, and that you've maintained that goal. Is that correct? Saving
Correct.
money.
Correct. And that's one of the things with this new legislation with solar for schools coming through. It's going to be the same piece going forward. You know, we want to be able to reduce the burden on our taxpayers. And, you know, as Rick stated earlier, with the energy costs rising, you know, you can't, there was some insight to that, but we couldn't predict where it's going to be now. So those types of things happening, we look for little wins, and a solar array was a little win for our taxpayers going forward.
No, that's great. And Rick, how about you? What was your team?
Actually, I had a board member who put solar on his house. So
wow.
He came onto our board and said, you know what, we should look at solar. And quite honestly, for many years as a principal, even an assistant superintendent in another school district, we have always been looking at ways that we can, what are the resources, what do we have that's unique to us, or what can we do that we can actually generate income as a public school district. And so talking with my board member, I realized that I had some interest internally on the board. I did pull together, I have a building and grounds person that I talked with him as far as area that we hadn't used, and working with my board president. I pretty much, as administration, I pretty much took that piece on myself and worked with board members. Moving forward, we looked at it as a cost savings. We didn't pay any money out front, and we have a plan that we were able to move forward with that. Also working with Greenworks Development. We actually looked at several different companies to come in and work with us, but we found Greenworks to be the one that kind of took our situation and tweaked it the best we felt that was in the best interest for Midwest School District. And so we partnered with them and teamed up with them, and they were able to walk us through. And like I said earlier too, my predecessor is actually looking at expanding that and going on the rooftops and going to 110%. And again, the goals for us were primary. It was energy savings. We saw our energy prices going up. I had no clue how energy was going to go up, but we just realized that that's a big line item on our budget. If that was something we could tackle, that would certainly help. We also did many energy saving projects prior to this. So we were gearing our abilities to be more energy efficient. We closed up some of the envelopes. We went geothermal, solar generation, or some type of electrical generation kind of was the obvious next step.
Yeah, that's great. Very logical progression. And Mark, could you speak? I know that you came into the district after the solar was already finished, but could you describe what you know about the team?
Sure. Yeah, it started out, connection with the grants, really through our district engineer, through a curtailment service provider we were working with on our energy program, Tangent Energy Solutions, and a supportive superintendent, supportive board, and with a goal of, hey, here's something we can do for our district, our community, our energy profile for no cost out of the gate, and then projecting savings over time. It just made all the sense in the world at that point.
And you've also had a very strong focus on energy efficiency, is that right?
Yeah. So part of my arrival here at the Bethlehem team was just looking at the solar is a really cool thing you can do, but you think about the cheapest energy is energy you don't have to use. So focusing on conservation and efficiency opportunities for schools, a rather large plant, 2.5 million square feet with 26 buildings, lots of opportunity to save. So those savings we project over solar are great, but doing some of the roll up your sleeves, dig in operational savings of conservation efficiency of our systems that we have in our schools is and we're on a solar discussion here, but there's a lot more bang for your buck in the trenches, if you will, of the facilities world. But the combination is where you really leverage and see the benefit. If you're doing both of those, now your savings and your impact is going to grow exponentially.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly right. Well, it sounds like all three of you had very strong teams with a lot of capacity. And it sounds as though your teams did this analysis of the electricity usage, which is step 2. Is that correct for all of you? Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yep.
You should be doing this anyway as a school district. Someone's already doing this for you.
Say that again, in your district?
Oh, hi, yeah. So someone in a school district, someone should already be doing this for you. This is already happening. Just got to find that person and extract your data.
There you go. So assessing your potential, you all did touch on this, and there are 3 slides here from the 3 different districts. So Mark, yours is on the far left. What is this particular location?
This is an array at an elementary school, Spring Garden Elementary, and one of our 5 arrays. This one, instead of using space that the school used for playground, a little baseball field out there behind the school, we were able to work with our city to site these panels in a detention basin, otherwise unused space. So half the array is actually sitting down in the sunken basin area. So, behind a fence, already unusable. So we're able to gain the value of the full array, but the impact to our green space was only about half the array size that occupied green space.
That's fascinating. And then the middle one is Midwest. I think this is your next phase.
Yeah, Liz, this is futuristic, should be happening this summer. So what you're seeing is actually an aerial shot of our high school, and they're going to be actually, Greenworks is working with them again, and they'll be putting ballasted solar panels on the roof of that. That's the project that takes us to 110% of our energy. So not only will we provide 100% of the electricity, but they'll also have that additional 10% and the SRECs, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But that's actually increasing the savings, but also generating income for the school district.
Great. And then Mick, yours is on the right here. And this is a particular piece of land.
Yes, this is a brownfield that was located behind the high school, and actually underneath this space is all the remnants from the 72 flood in Agnes. So our entire west side of Steelton is pretty much under that ground. So with that being a landfill, we're not able to penetrate the ground. So McClure Company came in, and there's giant tubs of concrete that our solar array sits in. So you could actually, obviously not physically lift it up, but you would be able to move this solar array and put it anywhere on your campus. It's 100% movable, minus the hookups. One thing, Liz, and as the Mark and Rick were talking, I did want to mention that in working with McClure Company, one of our goals too with this entire project was we were able to totally retrofit our entire lighting system and go fully LED as part of this project at no cost as well.
That's awesome. And that was part of the same bundle, the same contract?
Yep, all together right into the PPA.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great way to do it. So Roger, you're going to take it over here.
Sure. Step 4 of the toolkit is to answer the question, who should own our system? How do we want to develop the contracts and so on going forward? Now, prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, the power purchase agreement or some other third-party ownership was the key way schools developed solar. And that's basically because schools were unable to take advantage of the 30% federal investment tax credit. That's just too much money to leave on the table. So PPA is one form of that third-party ownership, where the payments are based on the kWh generated by the system. There's also the lease. The Midwest system is a lease type of agreement, where there's a fixed lease payment, not based on the output of the system, but a negotiated payment. And then the third model is direct ownership. And here is where the IRA is making a huge impact, because what the IRA does is provide the vehicle of direct payments, cash payments in lieu of a tax credit for nonprofit entities like schools who can't claim a tax credit because you don't pay federal taxes. It's now also the tax credits increased to 30%. It had been 30% over in the past, but was stepping down. It's now back up to 30. And beyond that, there are adders added for if you're using domestic content for the steel and the manufactured systems, components of your system. You get an additional 10%. If it's in a fossil fuel community and there's rules about defining those communities impacted by fossil fuel development, coal power plants and coal mines and things of that, you can get an additional 10%. And then there's a competitive 2-year program for low-income communities, a social equity adder here of additional benefits. So 30, 40, 50% or so of the system now can be covered by these direct payments. So that's a game changer. Next slide. There are some other trends that are happening that I think that schools ought to be aware of. SREC prices, they had been down to $5 or so. They're now, in the mid 40s. And so that's a stream of revenue. If you want to sell those SRECs, you can do that. An SREC is 1,000 kilowatt hours that your system generates. So every 1,000 kilowatt hours, you generate one SREC, and you can sell that. There's also a trend of Electric Utility Act 129 programs that are supporting solar these days. Most of the utilities in Pennsylvania now have, as part of their energy efficiency program, an incentive for solar. It could be up to 10 cents per kilowatt hour that was generated and used during the first year of operation. Doesn't extend beyond that, but it's still a big lump sum payment helping to reduce the cost of your system. And then there's a lot of money, just a lot of money coming through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act from the federal government to the states and other entities. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is reviewing all of those opportunities and working to determine what kind of programs do they want to get going or reinvigorate in Pennsylvania. So I say much is afoot. Stay tuned, because there's going to be some additional financial support that's going to be significant. This is just a table of a hypothetical system that we modeled. As part of the toolkit, we are generating or developing 2 pro formas, economic models, Excel models that let you play with the assumptions that you want to use for your model about the inflation rate, about the price increases for electricity, about the cost of your system, about your operation and maintenance costs, all of those inputs into what are the costs, and then what are the revenues? What do I think is going to happen? SREC prices going forward and things of that sort. And these pro formas will be part of the toolkit. You can download the Excel files. There's going to be one for the direct ownership and one for the third-party ownership model. This is just looking at a hypothetical. We made some best guesses about some of those assumptions for 600 kilowatts. But you can see here that their PPA is going to be providing savings compared to your normal electric rates of about $560,000. Direct ownership, and this is assuming a 40% credit, domestic content, but not more than 40%. But that boosts the savings up to about $800,000 over the course of 30 years. The third bar is looking at House Bill 1032, which is Representative Fiedler in the General Assembly, who's proposed grant dollars for school solar projects. And that brings it way up to $1.4 million. Now, the reason the PPA is lower is because you're sharing the risk, and price is often related to risk. So the PPA developer, they keep a lot of the risk, and so they want a higher return to support that. With direct ownership, you assume the risk, but you also get all of the savings, and so there's higher value there. Now, what happens with risk, that's up to you, but today, solar PV is a very modest risk. The cost of operation and maintenance is well known and very modest. And so this is not some fancy, risky technology you're looking at. This is more akin to, okay, I'm buying a school bus or I'm buying a boiler for my HVAC system. It's that kind of risk we believe, and so their savings are higher. So we're also in the toolkit going to be offering a generic model RFP, request for proposals, to solicit bids for your project. And it's going to request bids both under a PPA model and direct ownership, so that you can compare the relative savings and risk and so on of those two. So look for that when it gets published. Next slide.
Roger, just a quick question
Yeah.
from the chat. Says, can you define the risks?
Well, there are a whole variety of risks. Price increases going forward. What if your electric rates don't increase? One of the games that got played, and I'm sorry, that's too harsh a word. One of the issues in PPAs is, what do we assume will be the increase of electric rates going forward? And the PPA price often has an increase as well. So if your PPA price is going up at 3% a year, but lo and behold, in a few years, electric rates stabilize and don't do that, then the savings are going to decrease because your PPA price keeps going up, but your electric bill doesn't. So that's one risk. There's technology risk. What if the systems break and we have to replace components? That's now covered very, very well under various operation and maintenance agreements. There's a likelihood you'll have to replace the inverter sometime in that 30-year period. But there's a fund that these O&M agreements often build for that equipment replacement. There are other types of risks as well, but those are the big ones: price risks and equipment operation risks. Okay. Step 5. The key question that your school board is asking is, will this save us money? We heard that from the speakers early on, that the financial savings were the key driver for their systems. So the question here, and that step 5 seeks to answer, is how do we calculate what our savings might be? And let me call on Midwest, because the table down below is actual data from their system. So Rick, maybe you could speak about how you thought about these savings first, and how that was calculated.
All right. Sure. Obviously, as we talked about before, we looked at what we were paying on our line item. We looked at how much. Sorry, my phone rings right when I start to talk. How much we were paying on our line item, and when we started looking at our electricity use, and we talked already a little bit. I just want to clarify a few things too. As far as like a PPA, we didn't pay any money out, and so a third party, Greenworks Development, actually created an LLC, and they developed our solar array. So they actually at this point in time own it. But our payments are working towards, and also we're setting money aside that we will own that on year 6. So we wanted to become an owner of that as soon as possible. We didn't have the cash to do it up front. At the time we were doing it, some of the financial benefits that you talked about with the 30%, that wasn't available to schools because there were tax credits. We could not get those because we didn't pay taxes. So some things have changed, obviously, since then. So we went with this route of doing that. But what we're looking at too is what our electrical costs were. We, at Midwest School District, and obviously we've looked at what we were currently paying. We didn't know what was going to be, so we took a very conservative approach. Greenworks Development created an analysis. They took all of our bills. They created an analysis for us. And again, I'm an administrator. I'm not an engineer. I don't know, my business manager teaches me economics, but they created an analysis of our electrical program, putting in these solar arrays, what it was going to cost for us. So you still will have some utility payments because our electricity is generated that goes back into the grid. And then as we need electricity, we're taking it from the grid, we're paying at a reduced rate for our electricity. We also pay an agreement. Part of that agreement is the maintenance of the facility, but it's also it helps to lower the cost when we go to buy it on year 6. One thing you have here is the SRECs. That's a key component because some of the developers that we looked at, even with PPAs, we did not get to keep those SRECs and we wanted those. So we actually have those now, which are revenues. And so if you look at this, it looks like this, the savings, it says their savings on the first year there would have been 80,000. And then of course, in 23-24, electricity did go up, it's 280,000. But we look at this as a long game. You can't just look at it at your first year, your second year. Yes, that helps. But we looked at it as it's a long game over the next 20, even 40 years, how much you're going to save. And we're putting those, or at least they were when I was there, putting those dollars back so they could have money even to put on that system whenever they go to buy it. The goal is, for Midwest, when we put this in, we wanted to own it as soon as possible. So I don't know if that answers all your questions, but I think that, it really depends on your situation, but take that analysis that any company is going to give you. And, like I said, we worked with Greenworks. They did an analysis for us. We had that information spread out. And you had also talked to, Roger, you talked about some of the risks. One of the things, the solar panels now are, they've been out there for a number of years. They're tried, true, they're tested. We have ours near an athletic field and, they risk a softball or something, but they're very durable. But the inverters can wear out. And I think they estimate around year 20. I can't remember exactly what phase it's in there, but the inverters do. So we actually estimated that replacement of all the inverters.
Yep.
Chances are only some of them will go out, but we actually included it. That's a risk that the district's going to assume. So you have to figure that into your assessment as far as the whole cost of the panel. So hope that answered your questions.
Thank you. Yes. Any other comments about estimating financial savings from your system? Some of the problems you had, some of the difficulties, and then how that estimate turned out for you?
I wanted to ask Mick Iskric if he could talk about his school district.
Yeah, so basically, our savings will be, we're 100% in with McClure. They actually, under the PPA, they have the rights for 20 years. So the first 13 years, we save roughly about 13,000 a year. We're actually exceeding that. Like when I said earlier, they put on a 1.6 megawatt system, but it's actually generating a little more than that above the estimates, which is awesome for us. Starting in year 14 going through 20, we jump up to about a $200,000 savings per year for a total of 1.6 million. We're also seeing right now, we're seeing about an $8,000 to $9,000 credit on our electric bill every month. So we're actually generating, obviously generating more going forward. Same thing kind of as Rick stated, the company you work with the PPA, they outline all these things for you. We also, like I said, worked with NRG to kind of give a second set of eyes, and those two, McClure Company and NRG, work together to really develop a plan that's beneficial for us that was $0 out of pocket. So 100%, going forward. And then, like you said, with this House bill, hopefully this comes through, because that'll limit, the need for a PPA and more direct ownership for our district. And that's when you're underfunded $10 million and you serve a population that's above 95% poverty, very low income. Like I said earlier, looking for little wins. Those are the types of things that could be game changers for our budget, that has traditionally worked in a deficit for the last 14 years.
Wow.
Good.
And Mick, sorry, Roger, and were the savings written into the contract?
They are.
Okay.
They're spelled out. And, we make our PPA payments, but on the back end, we'd love to be set up where you could own it right from the start, or even get to where Rick was with, in year 6. That's awesome. Like, we looked at all those different avenues, but we could not, at this point in time, with our financial woes, we had no movement. So we were able to work this was the best opportunity for us. But like I said, going forward, and when we talk about down the road in the future slides with future projects, I'll be able to expand on some of the things that we're looking to do.
Great.
Yeah. How you structure these agreements are very flexible. If you want to own the system sooner rather than later, that means probably higher prices in the short term. If price savings are your goal, then you probably would need to have a longer term agreement. All of that's, fungible and you can push here and get here. The idea is of the toolkit is to educate you about how these different models work and what the savings are and where there might be some assumptions made that you don't yourself agree with, and it gives you the ability with the pro forma to change and use your own assumptions and just educate yourself so you're better able to negotiate with your solar developer, your solar installer. So that's what this is all about. Should we go on to step 6? Financing. With the PPAs and the lease agreement that we have in Midwest, financing is really the responsibility of the solar developer. But if you're going to be going the ownership model, direct ownership, you yourself will have to arrange for the financing. We're not going to cover that in this workshop. There's a third workshop on June 29th that will address all of the financing. But we'll start with use your own cash. If you have cash reserves on hand for capital projects, some of that could be used if your board agrees with that. Second, the direct payments under the investment tax credit. Don't leave that money on the table. Go for those direct payments. There are other federal and state grants, as I mentioned, that are in the pipeline that will be happening. Pay attention to that. And in the toolkit, we give you links to different agencies and sources of information so you can see where that was. And we'll be updating the toolkit as we learn more from the IRS and Department of Energy and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and so on. There's also public financing options. Many people have heard about green banks, publicly supported lenders. Much of this federal money is probably going to be deployed through a financial vehicle like a green bank. So look for that. And then there's private financing options, just regular lenders that are out there. Many schools get financing from private banks from time to time. You also issue school bonds, all these different vehicles for financing your project. And we'll be covering those in that third webinar. Okay.
Great. And Roger already mentioned that the toolkit will have a sample RFP that you can modify. So it'll be a tool that you can make it work for you. It sounds like both Midwest and Steelton-Highspire selected your partners early because you mentioned that they were on your team. So did you all issue an RFP, or how did you select your?
So I can speak to that. We did not do an RFP. We were looking at other companies, but we went with a company that we already had a relationship with. Being able to combine that with our lighting project, and it fit at the time. And we did prior energy savings projects with with McClure in the past. Like, we've had a long-standing relationship of over 20 years with McClure companies. So they work on our HVAC system. I mean, we have older buildings. We have a high school that was built in the mid to late 50s, and our elementary was built in 2006. So it's a very challenging system, but we have a trusted partnership with McClure, and that's how we were able to just work directly with them. And they did a solar array with Elizabethtown Area School District, which is not too far from here. So we were able to kind of look at the big picture of what they could provide, and the lighting project, coupling those two things together, and obviously building on the landfill and doing all the things associated with it, that was where we wanted to be.
That's great. And Rick, how about you?
We actually did not do an RFP either. Just as Mick had said, we had a relationship with, at the time, it was Reynolds Construction Company. We just remodeled an elementary school, went from coal-fired, heating, and we put in geothermal. We updated make sure the rest of our buildings were as energy efficient as possible, LED lighting. And as I said earlier, what the next step was is how can we generate our own electricity? So I contacted them, and they put us in contact with Greenworks Development. And so we moved forward, but we were looking at, like I said, I talked to some other developers that are out there for like PPAs. So we did do some research with that, and we, you know, some of the other ones that are represented here today or been talked about today, we've talked with them, and we just really felt a good connection, and we liked how it was structured, and we felt it was the best financial return on our investment where Midwest wanted to be in the future. And, you know, Roger said something, you know, about you have to look at that. Where do you want to be? Where are you? Some people need cash right now up front. Some people can stretch it out longer and look at the long-term play. That's what we did. And yeah, if we had the ability to just go ahead and buy it and put it in right away, that would be great. But we did not do an RFP for our project. We built on a relationship with a former company who turned us on to Greenworks Development, and now we have they're doing our second project there at Midwest. So yeah,
Right.
and
Right.
yeah, go ahead.
Great. And they're continuing to do phase 2 for you, right?
Yes, they are doing phase 2 at Midwest, the Midwest School District, and they've also worked with some of the other neighboring districts as well.
Right. I'm going to move on, Mark, because we're getting a little short on time. And I think the selection of the solar contractor in your case flowed from your decision about the PPA provider. Is that correct?
Yeah, Liz, unlike Mick and Rick, we had just done the solar all by itself. It wasn't tied to any other project. So we did an RFP. I think we had 3 folks involved, and we went with Tangent Energy Solutions. And at that point, it was turnkey. So once we had that PPA in place, then the construction, all that coordination, the supervision, quality control, all that stuff happened in the field, kind of outside to us. It was all right. When are we done? And when do we turn the thing on? It was pretty much invisible process for our district.
Right. And during the construction can be very, shall we say, inconvenient, particularly when you've got a lot of young children running around. How did you all coordinate the timing of the construction?
Well,
Did you do it during the summer or?
For Midwest, we coordinated ours for COVID. No, actually, it occurred when our schools were shut down. So it was pretty much very convenient for us. The schools were shut down, but quite honestly, there would have been very little, if any, issues with what was going on because of our location. But I know if we were doing a rooftop, maybe there would have been more. But for us, we were able to get it done actually while COVID had shut the school district down, and then we were able to turn it on later, obviously. But it did not impede any of our operations, even, you know, the little bit of time where school was in session. And it took a few months. I don't remember exactly how long, but there were no surprises at all. Because quite honestly, it was one of the easiest projects that I had ever been a part of, being a part of several construction projects throughout my career. This was by far the easiest one. The hardest decision was what color fence did I want to put around it. So very, very simple job. Very simple. That
sounds great. And Mick, how about you?
Same as Rick. I mean, it was very simple process, and working with McClure, like I said, they were very easy to work with. They coordinated all the various subcontractors and different things that needed to take place. It was roughly about a 6 to 8 month project, happened summer into winter. We finished up late winter, and we were able to do a full ribbon cutting in May of, so it was like, you know, we were already generating electricity or generating solar electricity, and good things were happening. So I'd say 8 months, you know, from start to finish, roughly.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Mark, you have 5 different systems, so it probably had to be staged. Is that correct?
It was staged over about a course of a year. It would just kind of sequentially march through. The ground mounts all happened during school time. No impact. You're kind of remote to the buildings, and you know, the parking lot canopy that was done over the summer, right? So we had no teachers there. It's a teacher parking lot, so that was the most convenient way to tackle that one. I think the roof happened over the summer as well. So yeah, really no impact to school operations for the construction.
Excellent. All right. We're going to move real quickly because we need to leave some time for questions. I know a couple of the schools are using local farmers with their sheep to help you mow. Is that working out? I think, Mick,
we've had some conversations, but we have not got anything off the ground.
Oh, okay.
And so we're looking we're continuing to look at that. We're also looking at utilizing, we actually just spoke about it yesterday, a possible remote mowing system. So trying that out, working with a commercial partner, and trying to have maybe a commercial remote mower in our solar array, kind of taking care of some things. So a lot of things on the table, but it's actually growing somewhat slowly, which is good, especially now. We're pretty much in a drought, even though it's not labeled a drought. So
Right. And Rick, how about you all?
Yeah, they actually have, I say deployed. We have sheep. We have a farmer that brings in his sheep during the summer, spring, summer, and into the fall. The sheep actually are rotated because they don't want to congregate one spot actually too much, but our FFA kids actually get a chance to work with the sheep as well. So we try to tie as much of this into the education process as possible. We did look at I was looking at robotic mowers to put in there and to mow and do different things, but everybody likes the sheep, so that's
Right. They're very popular.
they're cute too.
They are. And you've already mentioned your future plan is to go to 110% for the Midwest district.
Yes.
And Mick, I think that you've got some future plans as well, right?
we do. This is where it gets kind of exciting. So we were awarded 7 electric school buses. And in fall of 2024, we take those on, and we are going to be a district that has 100% solar, obviously, but 100% of our bus transportation is going to be electric that are charged off the solar. So pretty exciting stuff coming down the road. Some other things we're looking at, we work with First Student for our transportation company, and right now they have 3 locations where they have all their buses and they're running out of space. So we actually have a 2.5 acre plot that we're looking to possibly develop a land lease with them, where they'll have a transportation hub that would be able to charge up to 100 buses. So we're looking at doing that, expanding our solar, like kind of packaging this whole thing moving forward. And another wild thing that we're trying to do is, obviously every school district, the state is really talking about the teacher shortage. So we're looking at putting in some charging stations that will generate revenue for the public, obviously utilizing them, but also offering free electricity to our staff. So it's trying to, kind of give another added bonus, if for people to come to work here, but then also, reducing our carbon footprint, trying to be a little more green, doing those types of things. But future plans, especially with this House bill, wanting to expand our current solar field, obviously, to take care of all those transportation needs that could come down the road. And then we also are looking at installing a potential new solar field at our football field that's located off campus, upgrading the lighting, doing all the things associated with that. So, really, really trying to take advantage of these opportunities. If it can be direct ownership, it's going to be a game changer for our district. And like I said from the start, when you're underfunded $10 million and really trying to, when you save any amounts of money, it's a benefit 100% to us, and that's where we're at right now. So it's very challenging in a very small, very low income school district.
Yeah, I actually have to take my hat off to all 3 of you. Your leadership has just really been wonderful, and the foresight, as schools electrify, and end uses like school buses move to electricity, having the level of solar that you've got is a tremendous asset, just a tremendous benefit to your districts. So you're planning ahead, decades really. So it's just really exciting to see this. So I think we're going to now move to questions and answers. And I think, Lane, you've got a handle on all the questions that we need to answer.
I do, yeah. I've been saving questions from the chat. So thank you again to our speakers for that conversation. We had lots of good questions come in. One of them actually gets to something on step 9 that we didn't get to discuss. so much. So a couple folks were curious about how students have been involved in these projects, either using solar projects as living laboratories for education programs, or opportunities for monitoring and technical training around the solar arrays.
Well, for Midwest, I can say that, since we put in our array, our STEM programs, and we've been very competitive even at state levels for our STEM teams. But one of the things that some of our STEM classes were doing is they were looking at solars, and they actually developed curriculum that they go into the elementary school, and we call, a Sunday. And it sounds delicious, and it actually is, but they actually work with third and fourth graders, and they come up with different ways that the sun can do things like making a s'more, and how can it fill a hot air balloon, and how can it do some of these other things, and they incorporate. They do it right near the panels, and so our kids get to see it every single day. And our high school kids are looking at other ways that solar can be utilized, but also we're teaching some of our younger kids. But for me, as an educator, I don't think we brought it up, but I do firmly believe that we lead by example. And I think our job is as building nations, because when we educate kids, we're developing the next generation for our country. They need to see us stepping out and doing it, taking those risks, stepping out and looking what's out there. I think for a school district that has land or has the ability, has rooftops, to taking that risk and moving forward. Plus you can save money, which is important, but it's also leading by example. So I think our kids see that, and they've actually taken it a little further as far as even teaching some of the younger students just solar and some things that they can actually see and taste and enjoy.
See and taste, yes. Solar s'mores are very popular.
Some of the things we're doing at the district, we have two TVs in both of our buildings, and it actually gives the real-time data of what the solar array is producing and the carbon footprint that's being reduced as well. And there's a website that our teachers don't even have to leave the classroom. They can incorporate the real-time data into their lessons as well.
Yeah, the remote monitoring is wonderful, and it's just a part of every system. So it's not an adder. You've got that availability in every classroom. It's fabulous. Lane, any other questions?
Yeah, so a quick question. So for those who installed solar in a basin, does it actively flood, and are there any concerns with that?
Guess that one would be for me. In my 12 years here, I've never seen water in that particular basin. And if we get to some flood event like Mick had up there, that impacts our community, remains to be seen. But for us, it's been zero impact whatsoever with those panels in the basin.
In the Midwest, we don't have ours in a basin. We actually have it in a low-lying area. There's a stream that runs through there, and when we do get more intense rains, obviously it does come up. But that was taken into account. Greenworks designed work with solar renewable energy, and they actually raised the panels up to accommodate for that. So it's not been an issue when we've had heavy rains at all.
Yeah, and Mark, if I can clarify, where our flood took place, the west side is actually located down the hill from us by the river. All the remnants from that, all the housing, like the materials, construction materials, everything was trucked up behind the high school, and they made a landfill behind the high school in the 70s to take care of all that stuff. So it's kind of filled over with ground, and that's where we put the solar array.
Great, thank you for clarifying all of that. So, Roger, I don't know if you saw the questions that I sent over in the chat. I think you may be the better one to choose which one of those to answer.
Well, let's talk about insurance, because insurance is one of the expenses of your system. Typically with a PPA, the developer will insure the hardware in case there's damage to that for replacement. But the school district would very likely want to have some liability coverage that covers any risk that may come, accidents to individuals or other buildings from your system. So an NREL report that I saw recently used a rule of thumb for insurance costs for solar PV projects of $0.00025 per dollar, I think, of system cost. So a few $1,000s for a 600 kW system, maybe $4,000 a year for something much larger. But that's definitely a issue that you can negotiate with the developer and the installer to determine what are the different risks of liability and damage to the hardware, who's going to cover that, and what that expense would be. And the pro forma definitely ought to include that in your estimate of your savings going forward.
Right, we're just about at time.
Yep.
Yeah,
HVAC
so-
cost savings during summer, during heat. There was somebody else threw in a report that they quantified what those savings might be. I'm not sure the solar provides insulation during the winter time. So I would not expect that, but maybe Ron would know something more about insulation value and heating savings from a solar array on the roof.
Yeah, so I think we will go ahead and wrap things up. We are going to be saving the chat, and we'll have our experts here look through everything and see if there's anything that wasn't responded to, and make sure that we can get responses out to folks. Someone had the great suggestion of sending along a summary of the questions and answers in the chat, along with the recording that goes out next week. So I'll include that as well, because there was a lot of good information shared. And because I do see a few other questions I don't want to offer without checking in first. Roger and Liz, do you have a few moments to stay on for some additional questions?
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Continue
great.
to do that.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap up for the folks who have to get going. Thank you again to our speakers today, Mick Iskric, Mark Stein, and Rick Musselman, as well as Roger Clark. I have pasted in the chat our registration for our next webinar, How to Pay for Your School Solar System, coming up on June 29th. So that is going to get into all of the good nitty-gritty on financing. It should be a really, really rich discussion with some great speakers. So I hope that you will join us again for that and invite other folks who are eager to learn this information. Liz, anything else before we sign off?
No, I think I just wanted to add that we have been waiting for the final guidance from the Treasury, U.S. Treasury Department, around direct pay and the 10% adder for low income. Roger did mention this, that the 10% adder for the energy communities covers most of Pennsylvania. So clearly, easily, I would say 65% of the land mass of Pennsylvania is considered an energy community. So many schools will be able to access 40% in the federal tax credit, if not more than that. So we hope to have the final guidance by June 29th, but we are hosting the webinar one way or the other. So please come join us. And and thanks again, everyone, for joining today. I really am thrilled that our three school districts were so experienced and really have been leading by example. I just love that. So thank you very much to all of you. And we'll stay on for a couple more minutes if there are questions, burning questions to answer. Roger, have you got those burning questions?
Yes. Is Mark Connolly still on? Mark asked a question about the ESCO procurement process and how solar changes the bidding requirements. And I didn't quite understand that, so I messaged him, but I haven't gotten a reply. Okay,
I can,
Mark.
I can
You're
jump
talking
in.
about the ESCO requirements under ESA, is that it?
Yeah, the ESCO legislation, the legislation that created the ESCO program and defined energy and energy savings as an alternate path to bidding and analyzing bids.
This is the Commonwealth Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, GISA.
Correct, correct.
Yep, for everybody, yeah.
So as everybody knows, school districts struggle to purchase things because of the procurement process. And I believe one or two of these projects took the alternate route. I know McClure is in the ESCO business, and I forget who else was mentioned. This is a viable approach. It does constrain the competitors because they do need to be registered ESCO entities. It's not a free-for-all, and that's both kind of the beauty of ESCOs, and some might say well, I'll leave it at that. It's a different game, but it certainly is worth it if the bidding process is too cumbersome with the RFPs, with the competition, other elements that are associated with working relationships and financing. So it's a worthwhile discussion and maybe a section in the toolkit that can be an addendum to the traditional bidding process, which sometimes can produce the lowest cost, but not always the best system and not always the best relationship, especially for a PPA that is a long-term, it's a long-term relationship. I'm sure that I forget which one of the school districts engaged an ESCO to finance this.
Steelton-Highspire did.
So you had an ongoing relationship. They'd already done work. There was reason to continue, and you were able to take this alternate path of procurement.
Correct.
And were you satisfied with the transaction from a cost point of view?
We were, and like I had said when I spoke, you know, we do think we have to do things out of necessity because of being underfunded so bad and just our financial situation in general. But yeah, we were satisfied so much that we are already talking about the future projects, and their McClure Company's a player that's coming right to the table with us.
But Mick, did McClure get financing from the state under the GISA program for this, or did they get financing elsewhere? Because I think the procurement process that Mark's talking about only applies if you're getting financial support from the Commonwealth through GISA. Is that right?
I don't know 100%. I know Alyssa Wingfield was supposed to be on from McClure. I don't know if she's still on with us or not.
Well, by my knowledge, Roger, there's no engagement with the state financially in the ESCO process. It's
so
really,
then they're free to choose the procurement, criteria and so on. They don't have to comply with the GISA rules about procurement in that case.
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
If state dollars are not involved, if they're not making a formal application to the Commonwealth under the GISA for financing, then the GISA rules about procurement, the ESCO rules about quantifying savings and positive cash flow and all of that, that would not apply to a project that's not using GISA financing. If McClure goes to somebody else for financing, and all of those big companies have multiple routes for capital, the GISA rules wouldn't apply, and they'd be free to use whatever process.
Well, again, there's a little confusion, but the GISA process has no financing associated with it. It's a workaround for state procurement, basically, for governmental and school districts.
Right.
So
right.
there's, without getting too deep in the woods, the money coming to the table in an ESCO project can come through various means. It's not even always the ESCO that brings the financing. So it's a pretty deep subject, but it's well worth investigating, especially in some situations where there aren't good local solar contractors. And conversely, if you really want to support local companies like McClure, rather than being kind of stuck with a contract that might be responded by a big national company that maybe you wouldn't want to do because of the, the dynamics of the solar industry being so significant.
Yeah.
Hey,
Good point.
Roger, are
Good
there
point,
any
Mark.
other burning questions?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to bring up a question that a couple folks asked about plans for backup storage or battery storage. And someone said, especially in thinking of e-buses. But yeah, in general, any plans for backup storage?
Did any of you consider batteries?
Nick, I think the e-bus was your question. I don't know.
Yeah. So basically our buses are actually going to be the batteries. So they're built in with a battery within it. And the plan, my business manager is a little more well-versed on the e-buses, but basically they're going to be able to backfeed the school district and provide power charge. They're going to be able to charge overnight at a reduced rate, but then be able to backfeed the school district and be available for any losses of power or anything like that. So the battery is actually going to be the e-bus.
I know when we were looking at our array, we talked about batteries are just so expensive. The amount of batteries, and you talk about liability, that's a whole different realm of liability. So at the time, and maybe as technology advances, that could be a possibility to do that. So, that might be something the school districts would want to look at. I would also, encourage, and I'm hoping it gets developed. I had an experience where electricity in the town went out and we had just turned on our solar array. We had it on for like a couple of weeks. And I'm standing in my middle school looking at our solar array and my backup generator is running. And it kind of, frustrated me to some extent during a nice sunny day. And I have, no electricity or in my building. So, some type even switching devices during a sunny day to do that. And also I would think that would be great. And I don't know, we even talked about it, but utilizing schools for emergency, for Red Cross or for emergency centers if something bad were to happen, having that backup storage there would allow school districts to function and take care of masses if there was ever an emergency. So I would love to see something like that come out, but I don't know that technology is there yet. But again, I'm not an engineer, but it's
So
something.
Rick, we are actually there with the buses. So that's one of the things, when you have 7 electric school buses, we're going to be able to power the school and make it that hub. That's what we talked about with Red Cross and being able.
We don't own any buses. We own contract out for buses. I think you mentioned you may contract, so it's not something we ever looked at to do that. And I just haven't explored anything with the transportation piece. And also being a rural school district, my buses are on the road for a long, we have miles and miles and miles that we're traveling to get our kids. It's not an urban setting at all.
So Ron here, I just want to express my opinion on this issue because I think it's a very sensitive one. I think for having storage is really better designed to have on-site storage, fixed storage, in order to use on the facility to maybe shave peaks or to use for backup. I think that with using EV type vehicles with storage and using that to use against building loads under certain conditions, it gets very, very complicated. And you're almost at a microgrid, needing a microgrid processor to be able to really look at that, because you're using those buses to transport kids. Suddenly you have to figure out, wait, we can't use all of that because we got to use them for what they're designed for. So it's a very complicated thing. And I just say that it's got to be careful to go into that too much. If you want to have storage backup, I'd encourage you really to have more stationary design rather than using it from the EVs, as a common way of doing it.
Rick raises a good point that it's important that people understand. If the power grid goes down, your solar in most cases will not generate electricity because the inverter looks to the grid to see that sine wave and then matches up with that to convert from DC to AC. You can get an inverter that does not need to do that, and you can have other forms that will give the inverter a sine wave so it can operate. But just the typical solar array that's going in residential and many commercial areas has an inverter that will go dark if the grid goes dark. So that surprises people, but it's important to understand.
Yeah, and to add to that, and the sine wave that might come off a generator, the inverter can't synchronize with that. It's too
That's not the
messy
right
or
one.
sloppy or whatever. So that doesn't always work. And usually the solar system is interconnected, outside of where that generator is coming on. So when it opens up, when that generator comes on, because the grid's down, that solar system's offline entirely.
But as Roger is saying, you can anticipate outages and require that your inverter be an inverter that could function independently of the grid during an outage. Is that correct?
Well,
Ron?
with storage, you would need storage for that to work.
Yeah.
I do
You
know
would need
there was-
storage. You would need
Yeah, oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
I think
The reason is because a standard grid tied solar system, it just operates as much radiation there is. It just runs full tilt. If your load isn't as much as what the amount that's being generated, where does it go? You have to have a place of relief for that storage system to go and enter. And maybe it's into a electric resistance water tank or whatever it might be, but that's the reason why it disconnects. It's also meeting IEEE, standards as well. So
okay, but if a school wanted to build in that capability, it could do so in its planning. And I mention that because grid outages are becoming more frequent nationally and are anticipated to continue to become more frequent. So having backup power on site is very important for schools and is something that there are many different ways to solve the problem. And I am not the technical expert here, but I do know that there are many different ways to solve that problem. And it is one that if you're considering going solar, and you don't want the frustration of having your 1.6 megawatt system out there generating lots of power on a sunny day when the utility is not giving you any, you might anticipate that and build that capacity in. Well, I do think we should wrap up. We could go on forever, but please come back on the 29th and we'll continue this conversation. So thanks, everybody. And I can't thank our speakers enough. Really appreciate you all. Thank you.
thank